Well, well, looks like Michael Morris returned from the back alley in Michigan to tell us how he supports the pro-Palestine protesters. I have a little bit of a fond spot when it comes to Michael Moore, even though he's a total hypocrite when it comes to capitalism. He's made millions of dollars on films criticizing capitalism, but at least the dude's pro-peace. And right now, the powers that be could care less that we are plausibly arming and funding a genocide in Gaza because they have decided that they want this war and they're going to arm and fund it to the end.
From the river to the sea, this is one that is constantly being thrown out there. Oh, look at this! This sign is frightening all the students from the river to the sea, and it's like, well, why don't you talk to them? Because actually, first of all, large numbers of these students are Jewish students who are with the Palestinian students, who together are forming these encampments. I don't know if that's been covered very much. How much I saw this one instance where the Palestinian students inviting the Jewish students into the encampment, and then the next day they had a little nighttime entertainment in the encampment, and the Palestinian students decided to do a Jewish folk dance for their fellow protesters who are Jewish students.
Yeah, but can I?
How many stories like that have you actually heard on mainstream media that Jewish protesters are actually joining the pro-Palestinian protesters in these encampments? My guess is zero. And that's because they don't actually like real dissent in this country. And if there's dissent in this country, the people in charge actually might have to change policy. And they don't want to change policy because geopolitically, the Palestinians have no power. They've been offered a state 6 times, and they've turned it down every time. They've been hoping that international law will step in and actually try to give them a state. But there's a problem with that. The United States just vetoes every resolution that has to do with Palestinian statehood. So they're never going to get a state that way, which means they had to negotiate with Israel. And they felt that the longer they held out, the better deal they would get. And Camp David was probably their best chance to get a state to get most of what they wanted. They were offered 100% of Gaza and 97% of the West Bank, compensating land swaps with Israel. That was the best deal that Israel felt comfortable offering the Palestinians and Arafat, and they still said no. And the problem with this now is they're hoping the international community will come save their ass, and the international community, when it comes to this particular question, is a fucking joke.
I'm hearing anti-Semitic rhetoric at this, and it's not all just, a kind of kumbaya thing. That it is, there are moments where Jewish students have said they felt harassed, they felt unsafe on campus going to class. I mean, I think that's the question of where is the line in, yes, at some schools like Yale, where we've seen a Jewish student who wrote for CNN today saying he was sitting in with a pro-Palestinian protester, but where's the line between protesting and free speech?
Well, first of all, the protesters who are there supporting the Palestinian people and their right to be free, I would guess probably 98% of them are not saying anything that's anti-Semitic because they don't believe in anti-Semitism, in part because the Palestinian people are Semites. So to be anti-Semitic would be if you speak against Jewish people, and yes, anti-Semitism is, I think, one of the most horrific things. That the way people behave. Jews have been suffering as victims of this for 5,000 plus years, and everybody needs to stand up against that and fight it and speak against it. But what's going on? And I noticed that there was a report, I think I read in the LA Times today, and also on ABC News, where they were interviewing students saying they were being harassed and the Hamas flags are flying. And ABC and the LA Times did their own investigation, trying to find at these college demonstrations one Hamas flag that the protesters were carrying, and there were none. I just read, this is from the charter of the Likud party. That's the right-wing party that Netanyahu is the head of. 1977, I'm reading direct quote from the charter of the Likud right-wing Israeli party, and it says the following: the right of the Jewish people to the land of Israel is eternal and indisputable. Between the sea and the Jordan, there will only be Israeli sovereignty.
Religion is the main problem in this situation because we have extremists in both Hamas and we have extremists in the Israeli government. They're all basically fighting over what Sky Daddy gave to them, and that's why there'll never be peace, because they think they have holy claims on this land.
Decades have been the Palestinian people not being able to have their freedom, not being able to live in a democracy, not having their rights.
Yeah.
And why so many Jewish students are joining with Palestinian students, because they know it's wrong too. That's why the majority, I think, of Israelis certainly want Netanyahu out of there. Your own polls have shown that.
But two, there's
Sorry,
a CNN
our
poll.
apologies.
There's a CNN poll that showed today 81% of voters who are under the age of 35 disapprove of how President Biden has been handling this war. I mean, we're seeing it on campuses. There is a question of what we're going to see in November. I wonder what you think he should be doing differently to change those numbers.
I think we should just get used to the idea that Donald Trump's going to win the election. I'm 70% certain that Joe Biden's not going to change course at all. He's just going to hope that Donald Trump's image is ruined through the court cases and Stormy Daniels and the fact that he paid a porn star hush money in order to stay quiet, which no one gives a shit about. That's their best play, and just smearing people who disagree with them and saying they're anti-Semites. So I think we should just get comfortable with the fact that Donald Trump is probably going to be president again. And would he be better on this than Joe Biden would be? I don't really know how Joe Biden could really be much worse. I theorized in one of my videos that maybe since Donald Trump is kind of beholden to the Saudi government, and the Saudi government says we will not normalize relationships with Israel unless they recognize Palestine as a state. They just had a resolution in the UN in order to try to give Palestine a state, or to formally recognize Palestine as a state. And guess who vetoed it? The United States. So the fact that Joe Biden says he's for a two-state solution, it's just a fucking joke at this point. He thinks you're stupid.
I know we're speaking to millions of people, but I'd like to speak to one particular individual, and that is President Biden. I wanted to say this on your show tonight, that his chance of not being reelected, I think at this point is so great because of those numbers, because he's losing the youth vote. He's lost the Arab American vote in Michigan. So even Michelle Goldberg, in a column in the New York Times last month, said that you lose Michigan, you lose the election. I am fighting to make sure that doesn't happen. I am trying to save Joe Biden. And the Pope is right on this. We need an immediate ceasefire. It is wrong. A mass slaughter of innocents, of children, of women, of the elderly is a sin. It is absolutely against what we believe in. I know you know that too. I know that's why you're not really happy with what Netanyahu has done here. Pull the plug. You close the bank. You shut it down. Doesn't mean we're not going to support Israel, protect Israel. Absolutely. All of that. But not what's going on here. It is a mass slaughter. It's madness.
And this is where Michael Moore is losing me a little bit. He just approved a foreign aid package that gave Israel $26.4 billion. Spare me how he's going to change course, because he's already given them the weapons and the funding. I think it's best you should just get comfortable with the idea of Donald Trump being president again.
But we're going to lose the election. We're going to lose Michigan if we don't turn this around. If President Biden doesn't turn this around, that is going to do more to put Trump back in the White House. And I refuse to have Donald Trump back in the White House.
After those people were killed at the World Central Kitchen, they're willing to just change their rhetoric slightly. They're never going to change the policy. And I would be glad to come out here and say I was wrong, but I won't hold my breath.